of the Digital Studio for Public Arts and Humanities. I've had a deep interest in the names Memorial AIDS Quilt for many years, in part because I went to the University of California at Berkeley and I lived in San Francisco, and in the 1980s San Francisco was one of the cities, along with New York, that was hit especially hard in the first years of the pandemic. In San Francisco, really, it's where the quilt started, and people really adopted this commemoration, a group of people getting together and making a panel and memorializing the death of a loved one. AIDS Quilt Touch has a really interesting history. It really grew out of a conversation I had with colleagues. Ann Balsamo and Gail McDonald and I have been in conversation about public interactives being screens or electronic environments that the public can engage in. We actually took one of those big screens and figured out a way to use garage door openers and key fobs to talk to the screen. It was the sort of first engagement we had in the idea that the relationship you would have to screens could be more interactive. If you fast forward to 2007, the iPhone was introduced, and suddenly what we were imagining as big screens became screens that fit in your pocket. Research had begun on creating electronic environments where you could fully express the names quilt. And it's 1.3 million square feet big. It's close to 50,000 panels, which are assembled into 12 by 12 foot blocks. There are 8 panels on each block. And it's actually unseeable at this point. You would have to lay out the quilt from the Washington Monument to the Capitol 5 days in a row to display all the panels. So in conversation with Ann and Dale, we realized that there needed to be a way for people to be able to access information, to see the panels of their loved ones, to see the panels that they'd created. We came up with the idea of creating a searchable database where people could enter a name, and using the app, which we call AIDS Quilt Touch, you're able to bring up the panel, see it, and if it's on display at any given time, we actually use GIS, global positioning, so that a pin would drop, say on the Washington Mall, and show you where the panel was. It's a pretty complicated set of operations. The one we're most interested in is the idea that not only could you see a panel, but you could add a remembrance of your own. We're really looking at people who died unnecessarily, often too young. And at least in the 1980s, when there was a greater stigma around homosexuality, often gay men in San Francisco were abandoned by their parents. They died without their parents being involved, and it was really their friends and the people who came together to make a panel that made a sort of lasting memory for them. All technology projects have extraordinary challenges and difficulties, and AIDS Quilt Touch is certainly one of them. So, as you can imagine, a collection of people have tried to manage a database which now has 99,000 names on it. One of our primary jobs was to try to make sense of the database and try to bring it into a contemporary technological environment. For example, the name Bobby, Robert, Bob, Bobby spelled with a Y, could all refer to the same person. And so one of the things we've tried to do is figure out some consistency so that when we're accessing the right panels. Visiting Atlanta, visiting the actual warehouse where names existed was truly an extraordinary and very inspiring moment. And it's so touching that the quilt itself occupies a couple of fairly large rooms with many, many racks on which there are many, many quilts and some big bins where other quilts live. There's a small staff there. They are incredibly dedicated. They are the keepers of the quilt. You know, about 50,000 groups have entrusted to them these panels that memorialize loved ones. And they take great care in them in very specific ways. And regrettably, they're still getting panels sent to them, quilts sent to them regularly. One of the chief administrators, he walked us through how a quilt comes to them. And there's lots of communications with the family members or the quilt creators. Very touching, and it was inspiring to me to realize how much care was given to this thing. So, from my colleagues at the Names Project, they tell the story of one day a panel came in, as do all panels, but this one sort of took their breath away. It's a very simple panel. It's white border, black center, and then the words in diagonal. It says, "the last one." And it's a wonderfully bold and optimistic statement, but it carries in it the idea that at some point there won't be the need for any more panels because no one will die from HIV/AIDS again. It's actually led to the making of a film. It's one of the driving ideas now behind the Names Project. Our work continues on AIDS Quilt Touch. We're delighted that we recently received a $350,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. It's a grant we're sharing with the New School in New York City and with Michigan State University to take the mobile web app, which I would say is in a beta state, and produce more design and to take it out of its current database look and feel and to make it a much more narrative experience for users. So we hope that we'll be working on this for a few years, but in a future iteration, you won't go to the database and search for a name. You will go to the quilt and you will experience the wonder that it is, and you'll explore stories about the quilt, and of course you will get to the names. Right now it's primarily an app for creators and for people with a specific and keen interest in the quilt. We want to make it something that's as much of a national treasure, or that celebrates the national treasure that the quilt is. And until we're able to present the last one, the final panel that needs to be made because we've solved the HIV problem, it's a growing and continuing dynamic and vital piece of American history and world history.